about the rise of the Nazi Party. Would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm from Germany, now living in Finland. Um, I have been interested in history all over. It's not that I have studied it. I don't have a degree in history, but I have been reading widely on the topic of the time of the Nazis in Germany. So, uh, yeah,
Well, thank
starting
you
with
for
World War One
well,
and
thank you for your time anyway. And we've got the questions all sent in. Let's get right down to it. Question one was, why was the Nazi Party formed?
yeah, I found that a quite general question, and it's not really easily answered. First of all, the Nazi Party itself was not formed in the way that we know it. It actually rose from a former party, which was called DAP, the German Workers' Party, which was one of many actually that existed during the Weimar Republic. Um, and yeah, the story begins basically because Hitler, who was in the military during the German military, even though he was born in Austria during the First World War, stayed on in the military, and his task was actually to infiltrate and spy on these radical anti-Semitic national parties. And he was at a meeting of this DAP, and instead of actually spying on them, he was drawn in by the speeches and by everything that he saw, and more or less a week later joined the party. That was in 1919, 1920. And he basically undermined the leadership of the party and took over. And on the 20th of February 1920, he basically ousted the founders and the leaders. And that was the date when the name of the DAP was changed to NSDAP, so the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which basically is a conundrum in and of itself because it's basically trying to reconcile completely contrary political positions
So,
in the name. That's completely weird, but that's how actually the party came to be on in 1920. It rose
so,
out of the DAP.
so the word Nazi, was that like the Allies word or was that the actual German word?
No, that's actually something that came about in Germany. The Nazis were more or less from the beginning because the first word in the non-abbreviated name is national, and that basically stuck. And I don't know when exactly they started to call them that, but basically it was a derogatory term that the communists, which were always clashing with the Nazis and violently clashing with the Nazis, so that even people were killed in these clashes between the followers of the two groups, were calling them. It was Nazis, and it stuck. That's it.
So, so this Hitler was meant to spy on the group, ended up joining the group,
Yeah,
and then taking over the group.
exactly.
See what you want about him. That is actually quite remarkable.
Yeah, I
That
would
is,
say so.
that is impressive. What were there any other rival groups at the time? Because I know he shut
You,
down a lot of media, didn't he?
yeah, first of all, there were quite a few parties of the same uh, direction and basically with the same program. It was not that the NSDAP was anything special in comparison to the other ones. The name NSDAP, which they chose, was actually basically to rise above all the other three name parties. You have the DKP, SPD, and all those with the three letters in their name.
And they
Uh,
were like,
and
so they had like,
they said we need something to rise above this, and that's why they chose a abbreviation that actually had 5 letters instead of the 3 letters that everybody else had. And then there were quite a few actually of these anti-Semitic nationalistic parties, and it was not really until 1928, and we will get to that later, that the NSDAP rose above this group in any particular way, and especially not in votes. That was a big problem of the Weimar Republic anyway, because they had too many parties, so that nobody actually could form or could ever have an absolute majority, and that always they had to, like we see that in many other countries today, like especially for example Israel, where you never have a stable government because there are so many splinter parties that the electorate is actually split up all over the place, and it's not concentrated like in America on 2 parties or anything like that. Or in Germany, we basically started out after the war with a 3-party system, with very few splinter parties. By now, we are up to 5, if not 6 parties that are actually sharing the electorate, and there is always a problem. You have to find parties to work together to form coalitions that you even have a working government. And that was very, very bad in the Weimar Republic because they did not have a hurdle introduced. Like in Germany, you have the 5% hurdle. If you are under that, you are not getting any seats in parliament.
You
And
said Hitler ousted the founders, and then when you said ousted, do you mean that the founders met with them accident, or
no,
it
in
just
this case, it was simply he called a meeting where they were not invited, and basically he put out a 25 program list of 25 topics, which would be a new program, renamed the party, and basically said, okay, these guys are out. That in this case there was no violence. He did not kill these other people. That was something that happened later to a certain other group of the Nazis,
I,
when we
I,
are getting to
I
the.
I can't imagine that they would have taken that line down. Was there no retaliation? No, what happened to them
Basically
afterwards?
not. They did not really find that much on it, but it was just, yeah, they basically went to other parties, like for example what happened relatively short afterwards. We will get to that because that is one of the questions. Relatively shortly afterwards, the putsch happened, and then the Nazi party was banned. There were bans before, but there it was really in the whole of the German Reich that the Nazi party was banned. And the previous leaders and so on and so forth basically founded new groups or joined other groups, like for example the group of General Ludendorff, who was actually strongly involved in the putsch, in the beer hall putsch from 1923, but came out of it basically unscathed because of his name and his position.
Nice.
And he actually had another party, and they actually took in the followers of the Nazis, and strengthened their ranks with those followers when the Nazi party was banned.
So, the party before um Hitler took over. What was the difference between before and after?
Yeah, basically the name, and basically that Hitler concentrated it on himself, and that he had this 25 article long program that he gave there, where he clearly pointed, or where he determined a direction where he wanted to take the party, which was more and more concentrated on his person, and to consolidate his power. That was basically what was the difference
So they
there.
were still anti-Semitic,
Yeah,
basically.
it was already before, and it got stronger after that, because again, we have to differentiate between the time after the beer hall putsch and Hitler's incarceration, and before Hitler basically saw the way to power in violence, in overtaking and overthrowing the the regular government. Especially, he started this out in Munich and did not get any further. He actually wanted to overthrow the government in Weimar, but that did not even get that far because the beer hall putsch was just squandered, squashed by the military. But that was actually his intention at that point. Violent, violent, a violent coup to take out the government. While during the time that he was incarcerated after this coup, he came to the conclusion, no, I have to use the tools of the democracy, of the hated democracy, to kill the democracy, basically. And that's what he did. That's basically really the turning point. He wrote his Mein Kampf in that time, which and the publication of which actually filled his coffers, and he actually was that well off that he from then on was able to finance the much of the party. And he actually, it opened doors that he had money, opened doors actually to industrials and so on and so forth. Hermann Goering came in at that time as well, and he simply had the contacts to the rich people in Germany. And that was basically what changed after this whole incarceration thing.
Right. And we have someone in the chat, and they're asking, were parents really afraid of their children if they were in the Hitler Youth? I don't know if this is a serious question or not.
I'm not quite clear what he means, or what
Never mind.
the question. The question is like when parents actually were not for the Nazis. That's how I understand it. And the kids were actually in the Hitler Youth, and at home the parents might say something wrong, and the children might say retell that while they were in the Hitler Youth meetings or something like that. Would the parents really be afraid of repercussions of that and so on? That's how I understand the question. I am not.
Perhaps. I don't understand it either. Yeah, so
Maybe the one in the chat can. I don't see. Is the chat visible for me? Can I make it?
and the link I sent you, yeah.
Yeah, I see it now. But no, it's just my chat. Okay. That yes, that definitely was the case. People were afraid that children might say things that they have said at home, and so on. It's definitely the case. My parents themselves grew up in that environment. My father is born in 1931. My mother is born in 1935. So my father himself was in the Hitler Youth, and that was definitely the case that parents were afraid that children might say something wrong and repercussions would happen.
Did children actually inform on their parents, or was it just all accidental?
That's hard to say. I assume in many cases was accidental, but yeah, if the children are indoctrinated, you see it partly in okay, I have to admit I'm an atheist, so I have not a good opinion of religion, but you see it partly in religion where parents are acting against children if they are not really behaving like they should or what they expect, and vice versa, where children actually that get into cults are yeah, beginning to hate or leave their parents. And basically that was the same when the indoctrination was really that strong. There might have been cases, but that's definitely something I have not really looked that much into. But from the stories of my parents, that's definitely the case that when you said something wrong, my grandfather, for example, who had a good job on the German island Helgoland, but he was somebody who was not necessarily silent about his opinion about the Nazis, and the high-ranking Nazi in his hometown knew that and heard something that he said, and that ended him, even though he was uh, actually in a safe place on Helgoland. In the end, he uh, ended up on the East Front fighting the Russians.
Hmm.
So that
Uh,
happened.
On to question two. Why was there a desire to exterminate people?
I'm actually not quite clear what you meant with that question.
Why
Uh,
was there a desire to exterminate the Jews? I would imagine that's what they were meaning.
yeah. Um,
Why were Jews the enemy?
we have to go back to the latent or not so latent anti-Semitism that was kind of implanted in the German population, and not only the German population; it was actually all over Europe. But the churches, the Protestant and the Catholic Church, both were at that point clearly anti-Semitic. The Jews were guilty of slaying the Messiah, and that was something that was held above them. Uh, we can go back to Martin Luther, who has written a complete book about his anti-Semitism and the hated Jews. So that is actually nothing that is new or particularly German. Uh, but what actually the connection that the anti-Semitic nationalist parties actually made in the Weimar Republic was to the end of the war and what happened there, because basically they uh, bought the Dolchstoßlegende, so that the soldiers were not beaten in the battlefield, but the politicians at home decided that uh, they had to stop the war for some reason, whatever, and the politicians basically were Jews, or they were bought by the Jews and the international Jewry and its capital.
So
So
they blamed the Jews for the loss of World War One.
obviously, yeah, that's
Wow.
the absolute line that is there, uh, and that is something that was openly stated, that the international jury is guilty of or is the reason that Germany lost the war, and that they forced the victorious soldiers to give up, and so on and so forth. And Ludendorff and Hindenburg, the two generals that actually more or less had dictatorial powers in the end of the war, and now were active in the Weimar Republic in German politics. Hindenburg became Reichspräsident uh, before Hitler. So when he died, Hitler actually uh, was chancellor and president, and combined these two in his person. Um, they were, yeah, perpetuating that legend because it exculpated them from their responsibility, basically, because they were the ones that basically made the decision. They had no other choice. It was clear that the war was lost at that point, but they were the ones that basically made the decision, and then told the German parliament, you have to sign the armistice, you have to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Then later there was no
I
choice.
guess that also answers question three. Where did the hate and genocide agenda start, and what was driving it? The the loss of the German losing World War One because the Jews was a lie, wasn't it?
Did not quite understand you.
Uh,
Can you repeat?
I'm saying it basically answers question three. Where did the hate and the genocide agenda start, and what was driving it?
Yeah, it starts definitely at the end of the war, and with all these Dolchstoßlegende and everything that uh, is there, but it is enforced later in the in Mein Kampf. Hitler is, if you read it, it's clearly stating his plans that it will go into that direction, that he at least wants to oust the Jews from Germany. That's a clear plan. It might not clearly state I want to kill every Jew in Germany, but you can draw that conclusion from what he's writing.
An interesting conclusion to make then would be if Germany had won the First World War, would they have killed so many Jews during the second?
Um, it's really this what if scenarios. If Germany had won the war, or if the Versailles Treaty would not have been as harsh as it was, I think Hitler would not have had any chance to really get to where he was. First of all, if Germany had won the war, he would not have had any reason to. He would have been a small soldier that would have somehow maybe made a career in the military, and he he says my decision to become a politician was made when he was in hospital after he was blinded by a gas attack and he heard about the end of the war. That was the point when I decided to become a politician. I That's rather improbable that it really happened that way, but that's at least how he tells it.
Wow. You mentioned a treaty. What treaty was that?
I now mentioned the Treaty of Versailles just a moment.
Yeah,
Uh,
that one.
yeah,
What's the Treaty of Versailles?
that's actually later in a question of yours.
Oh, okay.
It's actually the treaty that finally ends the First World War. It's actually quite a bit after the armistice and so on and forth. Obviously, the stipulations had to be worked out and so on, but it's basically the absolute surrender of Germany and Austria, uh, the taking in the sole culpability for the war, and stipulation of reparation payments and all that kind of stuff. That's what's in the Treaty of Versailles, and it was in Germany. It was felt that this was the most unfair treatment that any losing party of a war has ever received.
Wow. Okay, question four. What were the views within the party on the socialism part of National Socialism?
Yeah, that was again a little weird because it took. You later ask about the communism and socialism, and
Well,
uh,
as I said, these are coming from some folk
yeah,
on Twitter,
it's
so
not a problem. Uh, so first of all, National Socialism was a part that I mentioned before. They were looking for two letters that they could somehow put in front of the three letters of the DAP, so that they had a distinguishing features from the other three-letter parties. But national and socialism basically are they are contradicting themselves, and that's what actually the whole name of the party is: a contradiction and oxymoron in itself, that does not really function at all, but it's actually a basin where it's a catch for all. We have a name that basically everybody can identify with. That's why we have nationalist in there. That's why we have socialism. We have worker in there. We have German in there. It's whatever you want it to be. But if you really look at what Hitler has been doing, and actually some of the stuff has survived well into our time, like the healthcare system, which actually had already been started by Bismarck and so on, but Hitler has definitely done uh, or has established it in the way that we see it today still, but basically in Germany with the health insurance and unemployment insurance and all that kind of stuff,
'cause
and
I
like the idea of paid holidays, and like they had a fund where people could pay money in to save for the first Volkswagen, so the VW Beetle that Volkswagen was producing at that time.
So Hitler was actually a progressive, you're saying, with his,
Yeah, definitely. There were progressive ideas, socialist ideas.
wow.
Absolutely. That's something.
Um, I was going to ask that, I've forgotten. Damn. It'll come back to me. Question 5. When did they change more towards their final form?
Yeah, the question is, what is really this final form? When
I think they mean the full-on army that were murdering the Jews in their homes and in the streets.
okay, I have understood that a little different. I was really referring only to the party in the final form, which means
Ah,
at what point do we really have this structure in place that is
yeah,
only concentrated on Hitler, and that all the others basically are surrounding him, bottom feeding around him, and are looking for, yeah, handouts and the grace from him, starting from Goering to Goebbels, Himmler, and so on and so forth, and then uh, further down. And that is actually latest established with the Röhmputsch and the Night of the Long Knives, where Hitler actually takes out basically the two warring factions of SR and SS. So Himmler's group of ruffians and Röhm's group. Röhm actually was a problem because he was openly homosexual, hated by the Nazis, obviously. So Hitler used this to get rid of this group, and that was really a very violent thing. I have no idea basically right now how many people were killed, but Röhm and all his followers were actually incarcerated and forced to basically kill themselves, or given the option, do it yourself or we will do it. So that's what happened, and he later sold it to everybody by saying that Röhm and his entourage were planning to over to a coup to take out Hitler, and Röhm would have installed himself in Hitler's place in the party and in his official capacities.
right.
So
Question 6 was, what was the reasoning behind it? We're not communist, but we've got socialist in our name.
what was the reason behind we are not communist but we got socialist? Yeah, um, there you really have to distinguish between communism and socialism. Socialism, like the SPD, was an established party, actually the strongest party throughout the Weimar Republic, and it was not communist; it was socialist. Even though Communist Manifesto and so on and so forth, it was socialist. The communists were on a complete other level. Uh, the SPD was not involved in this brawling and not as, yeah, brutal, let's say it, in their uh, in their ways. The Communist Party and the
Right.
NSDAP really were heads on each other and then fighting it out in the streets. The SPD was always above that. So socialism had not this mark of something that was yeah, extreme or left, and was definitely not influenced by communist Russia, which was existing at that point and was definitely leading the communist movement. And socialism was something different. So it was not impossible to use that, even though, like I said, they were just using for words so that they had this catchphrase for everybody. We have something for everybody in our party, basically.
I see. Do any mod question eight, well, it's maybe 7. I've miscounted. I've missed uh, thingy.
This should
Question.
be question 7.
Yes, I put question 8 like an idiot. Do any modern day ideologies, regardless of their political agenda, reflect the same, if not similar, qualities or beliefs as Nazism, and if so, which ones? Now, I,
Oops.
I know you're from Finland and not from the USA, but
Somehow this question was not on my list, but okay. Let me think. Um, yeah, right now, I'm sorry, America obviously comes to mind. The
yeah,
Republican Party is not far from that. Uh, in Great Britain, you have UKIP and similar parties. In Germany, the AfD uh, is definitely right leaning, but basically rather populist. That's there are layers. They are not openly fascist, let's say it that way,
yeah,
but very often they are strongly influenced by religious ideas, like the Republican Party is. The AfD has similar ideas. They are just not as open. There, on the other hand, the AfD in Germany tries to reduce the power the churches have in Germany. That's in their agenda as well. It's so they are following very conservative idea of family and all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, they are not really working or want to work with the churches. It's really a very weird party in my opinion. But uh, I think the question I I remember answering something like that the about the situation in Europe right now and all this yeah right wing wave that we are
yeah.
seeing at the moment. Um, I think that's a scary thing, but what I do not see, and that is in my opinion the big difference, is the strong man. So there is no second Hitler anywhere in sight. There is nobody that could throughout Europe, and it would have to be a European movement. It will not do that one country has a strong man or something like that. It would have to be really a European movement because right now to uh, break the European Union into parts or something like that. Okay, Great Britain is trying to do it right now. I'm sorry, another scary thing, but I do not see any strongman like that. Trump in America is just, I don't know how this happened. I have no idea what's really going on there. And I can only hope that we see in November that the trend is changing and that
Yeah,
Trump will only have this one. Uh, uh, oh,
session. One run as
yeah,
president.
yeah, one run as a president. I'm not. I'm blanking out on the word that I'm actually looking for. That really defines the term of the president of the 4 or 5 years that is exactly is now. But that he will only have, or that there is still a chance that he might be impeached, even though I don't know what we can expect from Pence. Then he is.
So,
The thing is, his agenda is not much better, but Pence is not as stupid as Trump. That's the the only difference. And I'm not even sure which one is more dangerous, if Trump or Pence. That's really
well, from going what you're saying, Hitler wasn't stupid either. So, if that's going anything to go by, we probably still want Trump in
yeah,
president.
yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if we impeach Trump, we must find a reason, or if they impeach Trump, I'm talking as if I'm American, uh, then they have to impeach Pence as well. There's
Yeah.
no way around that. And they, like, I read it somewhere, impeach Trump and then keep on impeaching. So it's really, you have to go down all the way and take basically everybody who's in his cabinet now and get rid of them, because just imagine a Jeff Sessions instead of Trump. Oh my gosh, that would really be uh,
Question 8 now.
yeah.
How did they feel about the banning of the Nazi Party in 1923? And it was it believed that it led to the party's rise in power? So
Yeah.
did the banning lead to the rise in power?
I do not really see it that way. First of all, uh, it was not the first time that the Nazi Party was forbidden, but the other bans were locally. This one was after the beer hall putsch was really nationwide. Uh, but actually, like we talked about before, there were so many other anti-Semitic nationalist parties that they took care of the followers of the Nazi Party. It took out the yeah the not the the core people were still there, and Hitler had ways from his incarceration, which actually only lasted about 5 months anyway, uh, to steer this core group in the directions that he wanted. And actually,
So
uh,
why were they banned?
why were they banned? It's in connection with the beer hall putsch. So what happened in Munich in 1923 was that the Nazi Party actually wanted to take over, and it happened uh, in the Bierhalle. That's why beer hall putsch.
Mm,
And they had actually the mayor of Munich and some other politician hostage in there, and they wanted to force the government to step down, the government of Bavaria, that in this case, to step down, and from there they wanted to go further to Berlin, but that did not happen because they were the police and the military took them down.
mm,
Hitler was actually hurt. Goering fled the country. Hitler was caught and incarcerated, and that was the time when he wrote Mein Kampf, or better, dictated
mm.
it to Rudolf Hess, who actually wrote it. And
Question.
but we are not done with the question in that respect.
Sorry.
So the banning was not really something that led to the power, because the Nazi Party existed further. Hitler was for some time after that forbidden to speak, but even that did not really hinder anything. But what really happened was the publication of Mein Kampf, which filled the coffers of the party, or better, Hitler's private coffers. Hitler, they bought a newspaper at that point, which was published nationwide, and that made Hitler's name and Goebbels' name and so on and so forth known all over the country. So they were charging to appear for speech engagements, and that again filled the coffers of the party. And what
Mm,
then happened in 28 was were really uh, and there you see it's not directly a consequence of the ban, because it actually takes the ban has is lifted somewhere in the beginning of 24, but we see that the votes for the Nazi Party are rising in 1928. In
mm,
between, they are not really much better than any of the other parties, but in 28 you see really that the voting success is rising. And what then happens is the stock crash in 1929, and that's really where the Nazi Party suddenly, uh, because of money that flows in from the industrials, Hermann Goering comes back and establish contacts to the rich people, and that's where we see a really rise in the votes and so on and so forth. So it's
great.
not the ban that actually established or did cause the success of the Nazi Party.
I see. Question 9 is actually the same as question 7. What similarities of today do you see from then? It's the exact same kind of question. Then.
Yeah, it's basically what we have answered before.
Yeah. Question 10. How much of a factor in the Nazi rise to power was the Treaty of Versailles? How
Yeah,
much of
we
was
basically had said that already.
yeah.
Uh, it's the Dolchstoßlegende again, and all that. What happened after that? Uh, they were using it, and they were really hating the democracy that came out of uh, the war, and so on and so forth. And they set out to destroy that. And that the Treaty of Versailles, how it was seen in the populace of Germany is definitely one of the reasons for the successes of the Nazi Party. But again, if a person like Hitler is really the catalyst, in my opinion. Without him and without somebody like Goebbels, who then took over the propaganda when he joined, uh, I do not think that we would have seen this. And the problem in the party system, that it was impossible for somebody like von Papen, I don't know if the name does ring any bell, he was chancellor before Hitler. He was working in tandem with Hindenburg, and they thought that taking the Nazi party into the government would actually calm them and that they could control Hitler. And that's why they offered him in 33 the position as chancellor.
Oh,
And they completely underestimated what he would be doing. And it was really a gamble that Van Hindenburg and von Papen played, and that was really how Hitler. Yeah, it's not for nothing called the Tag der Machtergreifung. So the day where we grabbed the power. It's really. They asked Hitler. Hitler was hesitating and playing games and so on and so forth. And finally, they made him an offer where he more or less, yeah, could not say no, because he knew that he could use that power to establish himself in such a way that they could not do anything about him anymore.
damn. So the gamble did not pay off. And
Yeah, it definitely did not pay off. And uh, then what then happened was really playing into the Nazi thing, as if I remember everything now correctly. Uh, they the the Reichs the Reichstag, so the Parliament building, burned. It was actually, there are suspicions that actually the Nazis were doing it themselves, but the official reading is that a Dutch anarchist went in and committed arson and burned the building. But based on that, and it's clear that that thing was already drawn up before, uh, they uh, they passed with intimidating and repression of the other parties in parliament. Uh, they passed the Ermächtigungsgesetz, and that actually was the death knell for the republic. That was really the end of story. Nobody after that could touch Hitler. There was one more election, and even in that election, even though there was fraud and there was repression and everything, even in that election, the Nazis did not mention to get the absolute majority of over 50%. They ended at 44%. Uh, but still, with that law, Hitler had absolute power, that nobody could touch him anymore.
question 11. What happened to the Second Reich?
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because uh, there are actually two ways to look at this. There is a conventional way, which would count the First Reich would be the Kaiserreich from 1871 till 1980. Then the Second Reich would be the Weimar Republic, which is the inheritor of the first one. And then we have the Third Reich. But the Nazis actually are counting different. They are claiming that they are the Third Reich based on the fact that there's the Holy Empire of German nations, which lasted from 962 till 1806, which ended in the Napoleonic time. So when Napoleon uh, overran the German Reich, basically. That's when that ended. Then you have the reestablishment of the German Reich in 1871, which ends in 1918. Then we have the Republic, and then we have the Third Reich. So the Republic is taken out of that, and the Nazis are not counting it. But I, in this case, assume that we are talking about the Second Reich as the Weimar Republic, and that we had already mentioned that basically ends on January 30th, 1933, with the installation of Hitler as Reichskanzler. And definite death knell was the Ermächtigungsgesetz. From that point on, it was the democracy was dead. But again, officially, because the Nazi regime actually uh, governed based on the laws of the Weimar Republic, uh, it's kind of a continuum. And official reading is then again that because this is actually one entity, that it ends in 1945 with the armistice, basically when Germany surrenders to the Allies. So it's a little difficult there to say what is what and what ends where. But if you see the Weimar Republic as a separate entity, it ends basically when Hitler becomes Reichschancellor on 30th of January 1933.
Cool. Well, actually, thank you for your time here. Just the final question: what did the Nazi Party think of foreign offshoots?
Yeah,
I know that most kind of advocated different forms of fascism, like Nazism specifically. Groups like the
so
Iron Guard and Netherlands one was straight.
what I found
Shit.
was especially the Austrian Nazi Party, which actually kind of carried on, especially in the time when the German Mother Party was banned, and really was very strong in that time. As we have to remember, Hitler was Austrian; he was not German, uh,
Mm,
and so the Austrian Nazi Party was absolutely strong and was really following the in the footsteps and very closely to what the German party did. You had, or in the question, it was mentioned the Dutch party. I had to read up on that. Yeah, it was actually that way that they were fascist and nationalist, but they were not anti-Semitic or anti-foreigners or something like that, which is, in my opinion, explainable when you look at the history of the Dutch and their colonies and the influx that they have from their colonies. It's a very mixed and very
mm,
uh, very open kind of people, and then therefore it was not surprising that uh, a party that would run on anti-Semitism and run on yeah, this xenophobia or something like that would not really do very well. So they kept that out, and the Dutch party actually did quite well. But yeah, Mussolini was Hitler's big role model, but again, they did not have this anti-Semitism in them because, yeah, I don't know that in Germany the anti-Semitism was much more uh, ingrained in the populace, it seems, and the same goes later for Franco in Spain. Hitler supported him, even sent the Stuka-Staffel over there, Guernica und ähnlich, and in similar places that they basically destroyed. So
yeah,
uh, they were supporting uh, the uh, the European fascists all over the place. So
I know quite a few countries joined Germany, including Italy and Japan. Did Hitler, the Germans, or Nazis consider these helpers equals or just like tools, or do you think they would have turned on them as soon as the war was won?
no, I don't really think they would have turned on them because that was never Hitler's plan. He was not planning on a European Reich or anything. He did not want to reestablish a Roman Empire or whatever. Uh,
Mm,
I'm not even certain that he really uh, was that keen on fighting the West at all. That was kind of, yeah, we have attacked Poland because we want to go to the East. And from there, it was kind of the dominoes that fell. that he had definitely not expected that the European forces like Britain, like France, and so on and so forth, that they really would honor their commitment to Poland. That's something that I do not really think they had calculated with, at least not that quickly and not at that point. And therefore, I do not really think that they would have turned on Italy or Hungary and others uh, that actually supported them. But that's hard to say really, because yeah, the way it happened with Mussolini, for example, that Mussolini did things that Hitler did not want him to do, like the whole Africa thing was something that was not planned that way. It was let in the end caused by Mussolini, and it caused Hitler uh, a lot of forces that he had to get down there that he actually could have used in other places much better. So it's really kind of unanswerable question what would have happened in the end if Germany would have won and then had time to recover from all this and then said, okay, let's take the ones that were allies with us and let's take them over. Don't know what really would have happened there. That's really.
Well, thank you again. Thank you very much for your time and answering all these questions that our viewers have sent in. It's been most informative, and I hope you've equally enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, no problem. I like to do these things, even though this is the first time that I did it that way. I'm normally on Facebook and discussing things and all the time in writing. It's a little difficult or different to really speak about these things without all the time looking at some paper or the screen to read it off. So yeah, if you have anything like that again, I'm definitely game if you
Thank you
contact
very
me
much.
again.
I shall let you know as when we do. I shall start the broadcast soon. Everyone for watching, thank you again, and I'll see you next time.